Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle powered by PGC Basketball. We believe in the value of a coach. We're here to educate, empower, and encourage you to lead like never before. This week, we welcome PGC Director Dustin Aubert to the podcast. He shares lessons from his coaching career and deep dives into the game, including what makes offense work, how to teach the game, skill development, using film, and lots more. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Hardwood Hustle. You are in for a treat today. We're going to talk with Dustin Aubert, and I'm pretty sure that if you're following Hardwood Hustle or PGC or me or Sam, you know who Dustin is. You've seen him in our social media where we've retweeted a bunch of the stuff that he does, cutting edge offensive information. He's a director with us at PGC Basketball. He works with PGC Coaching as a mentor to coaches as well, and he does a phenomenal job on social media. Behind that, he's been a college basketball coach at multiple levels. Just created a course that I thoroughly enjoyed for our PGC coaching members on habits and actions that teams run that are really important in your offense. And we implemented, a couple of them right away with our team. And I just love the way that he sees the game. And so if you're looking for your offensive mind to expand and to get better, this is one of the best young minds I've been around at seeing the game and looking for what you can do to improve your team. So I know that's what you're all after, coaches, making your team better, and you're going to have a great opportunity to do that today. Dustin, welcome to the Hardwood Hustle.
Appreciate you guys having me, man. Just grateful to be here.
Yeah. Hey, Dustin, give us a little bit of I just always enjoy talking basketball with you, and I know you're always watching it, always breaking it down, and you have great insights. Where did that passion come from? And tell us a little bit about the kind of how your evolution as a coach and a thought leader came about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we say this in sessions all the time, but I think as coaches, we coach the way we've been coached. And kind of how you said, we coach the way we've been parented. And I think I've been lucky enough just from a young age to stand on the shoulders of giants, but also to sit at the feet of mentors and just aggregate knowledge and learn over and over again. Just a quick, I played collegiately at Millsaps College in Mississippi. From there, I was a graduate assistant at Long Beach State. I was there another year after that, and my job was specifically player development and skill acquisition. And then in games, I did a lot of analytical statting, so multi-sided possessions, paint touches, and the like. And then after that, I was a junior college associate head coach for a year. And then the 3 years after was the head coach of the program. And my life mentor, his name was John Nagel. He was kind of there by my side and guiding me through it. And then once that journey was done, I became full-time with PGC. And I also have my hand in a couple of other things, one of them being helping out with the NBA pre-draft process with another friend of ours named Gilbert Abraham, and then just kind of learning the game, as we go. So
I love it. And anything basketball, you want to be involved. You dived in. You're just a lifelong learner. And so we're going to dive into some of that today. Let's start with player development. Because I've seen you do this before, and you do it at a masterful level, and you run PGC sessions. I've seen you just transform kids' games, and now you're working with players at the NBA level. When you think about the development of a player, and at age stage, I know it's different for each age and stage what you would be thinking, but what is the first thought you have when you think about, okay, I need to help this player get better? What are you trying to do? You talking to the coach that's thinking about their high school players or their college players or middle school players, like what is the first thing they should be asking themselves and thinking to figure out, how do I want to make this player better?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's knowing the fit of that player. I think there's a really good book called Range by David Epstein. And one of his big things is all great players and all great learners have habits of mind that allow them to dance across a multitude of disciplines. And it's the same thing with the game of basketball. And so from a skill acquisition standpoint, I think the thing I've learned quickest is it's knowing where that player fits. Meaning, we usually will take them through a SWOT analysis, which is SWOT, which is where we evaluate their strength, their weakness, their opportunity for growth, and a potential threat to their game. And then from there, we look at where they can maximize their skill set the most. A lot of coaches that live in the skill acquisition world love to teach a one-size-fits-all approach, where not everybody is the ball-dominant guard who takes 97 dribbles a game. A friend of mine used to call it the Mikal Bridges theory, meaning we need a lot more Mikal Bridges on our rosters. And a Mikal Bridges, if you look at the functionality of a player, he operates with the ball out of his hand really well, meaning he's great at cutting back door and finishing at the rim. He's really good at catching and shooting at over 40% from the corner three. And then he's really good at stampeding the catch. So meaning he's able to catch the ball and beat a closeout quickly. And that skill set, just transcends levels of play. And once you've mastered that, then you can start playing with the ball in your hand a little bit more.
Dustin, let's go back for a minute to, you mentioned, right, the opening about mentors. And, I think all three of us share some similar mentors. Maybe just unpack a few of the things, the biggest takeaways you've had from a couple, whether you want to share their name or not, but more so would like to hear what you've learned in your early coaching career that you reflect back on, say, yeah, this is definitely a part of who I am because of this person.
Yeah, definitely. And I love talking about this. There's a guy named John Nagel who I was able to learn and coach from. I played for him 2 years at the junior college level. He's a PGC guy who's never been to PGC. He just lives his values loudly, and I love that about him. And so when I was the head coach, he was my life mentor in the role as my associate head coach. And what he did better than anybody I've ever seen is he puts life in perspective really well. And what I mean by that is, I'd said this on another podcast, but we had played in a game where I realized that my dialogue in games was much different than my dialogues in practice. And he was really good at letting me know, like, man, you earn their trust. Because like you guys, I'm very positive by nature. I criticize to uplift, not to destroy. And then I realized in games, I was very combative by nature. It's because my coaching hat would be put on and I'd get so competitive in the moment. And so I'll never forget what he did so well is, after a tough loss or a tough half, his phrase was always, how is your response to this going to affect their long-term development as men? And for me, like, it'd always take me out of, who cares how we played right now? How can I tie this into the father they're going to be one day or the husband they're going to be one day? And it's, for me, it continuously put things in perspective, realizing that, we're doing life with these young men and our job is to leave them better than we found them. So that first and foremost was the biggest one.
Yeah, that encompasses a lot of things. When you I think about most coaches, and most coaches, probably teach during the day or have a job, and then they've got players they've got to go work with and individually get them better. And in the meantime, I think they're competitive people. They want to win. They've got families at home. There's so many things that go into that. And keeping that perspective, let's expand on that for just a second. Like, keeping that perspective amongst all of the things that are going on with the pressure to win. Like, how do you really get to that place? I think most coaches want to be transformational. That's my thought, my opinion. I want to do that. Most coaches fail to be transformational because of all of the things that are around them that put pressure on them, suck time from them, or whatever it might be. So you had a mentor that continually helped remind you of that. Dive into that a little bit more. Like, what can coaches do to make sure that they do keep things in the proper perspective?
Yeah, and I think perspective is everything, and I obviously love to hear your guys' thought on this. But I think the reason we seek out mentors is they guide their lives in different ways that we aspire to. And I think I was just really lucky that every coach that I had or every coach that I've worked for, I remember looking at that human being and being like, man, I wish I had a part of that in my life. Whether it's how they stoically respond to mistakes, how they're able to speak in front of a group of young men, or how they're able to carry themselves through adversity. And so I think what I've seen really well is the greatest teachers and leaders and change makers, they cast visions for other people. I've talked about this a ton, but Coach Nagel would do the magical feedback a lot, and it's one that I do as well. It's from a book called The Culture Code, but it's basically 19 words that you can give players that help with buy-in. And the 19 words are, I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know that you can reach them. And again, there's complexity in the simplicity, but those 19 words does three things. It shows them, one, you're part of this group. Two, this group is special. We have high standards here. And then number three, I believe you can reach those standards. And I think in some facet or fashion, all great change makers and leaders give a form of that feedback. They're not external, do this because I said so. Steph Curry didn't become Steph Curry because someone yelled at him to do so. but they light an internal fire and cast a vision of how to get there.
Yeah, I love that. I love just thinking through that process of, and what I'm hearing you say, Dustin, that I think a lot of coaches, you got a plan. You got a plan, like you got a clear direction on just being able to articulate those 19 words and so many other phrases that you use. Like, this is who I want to be, kind of like we do at our PGC culture, like living up to our commitment statement. And we fail at that, right? Like you were with great humility about how, gosh, I want to be this type of coach, but I got into games and certain things overtook my feelings. But you knew who you wanted to be. You wanted those 19 words to be true for them. You wanted to show up that way as a leader each and every day for those players. Tell me about some of the adversity, like in your coaching and developing of players. Tell me about how those two things come into conflict a little bit. Like, what are some things that generally you're like, gosh, this is where I had to fight what I wanted to say and what I wanted to do versus who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up?
Yeah, it's a great one. I think, as coaches, we want to continuously be the standard. We're the standard that we allow in our presence. And I know that our players respect that as they get older. But in the moment, it's really hard to do. It's really easy to be okay with your best player coming in 15 minutes late because they had car trouble. And what we did was, at the junior college level, everybody has car trouble. That's kind of the thing everybody says. And so we get the car trouble rule, meaning you get one car issue as a team per season. So use it wisely. And our guys used it on day 2. And luckily enough, we never had car trouble again. But that, it's so funny because we aspire to be that standard in every room that we walk in. But there are times where you need to give them love in a tough way. You need to remind them that they want to show up a certain way and they're not showing up that way in your space. So you need to hold them accountable. So I think it's hard when guys are super bought in and the culture's there, but we've given up 15 offensive rebounds and we're down by 18 and a half to keep that self-belief. I think we did a really good job of making sure guys stayed bought in the entire time. But I think there's this thing called the coach's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if the first needs aren't met, everything else is going to fall. And the needs are at the college level, like positional size, the ability to hit corner threes at volume, and the ability to get paint pressure. And so, coaching buddies of mine as well will have unbelievable cultures, but they don't have the bodies to put pressure on the rim that way. And so they're just not going to win games.
Dustin, so you touched on that just now, like that, what you just said brings to life. I watched your course 3 times in totality and phenomenal job with that. And you did a deep dive and just unpack some of the things you learned for the audience and some habits and just give us more insight into this recent basketball project you took on and what could help coaches from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, in this last year, there's a guy named Gilbert Abraham who we all know. I'm lucky enough to do some of the pre-draft stuff with him. But he is a different kind of basketball mind. Like, he really enjoys the game. And a friend of mine who's a comedian used to always say, I wanted to be a comedian until I met somebody who really wanted to be a comedian. And then he ties that into like, I wanted to be a boxer until I met somebody who really wanted to be a boxer. It's same with Gilbert. Like, I thought I liked basketball till I met somebody who really likes basketball, and he's moved the needle for me. And so now, like, I've seen the game in a bunch of different lenses. And what I mean by that is this. This is his phrase, and Sam, I know you like this one as well. It's, rim pressure is king, so corner threes at volume is queen. And basically, the part of this project is designed to put habits of play that can be used in any offense. And in any offense, you're doing a couple of things. One, you're looking at how you can get second box rim pressure. And so the second box is if you take the logo that's in the paint, so most colleges put their logo inside the painted area, or charge circle and below, that's the first box. So your high-level first box finishers in the league are Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, LeBron James, your bigger, stronger guards. They're able to get 2 feet in that first box over and over and over again, and that gets the team, the rest of the defense, in rotations. If you can't get in that first box, the second box is anything charge circle and above. So your second box paint touchers would be like Steph Curry, Trae Young, Drew Holiday. You're not as big guards. And so basically the offense is how can we get pressure in the paint and make the defense scramble around you? Part of it is called dominoes. And dominoes is once we've broken the shell of the defense, do my teammates know that we're not running our set anymore? Instead, we're trying to get the next domino to fall. And not only can we recognize that, but can we advance that from a 1 second advantage to a 2 second advantage? And so the three rules of dominoes really quickly are, one is, one can't guard two. So on the weak side of the floor, one defender can't guard two offensive players, because if so, that's not good spacing. Number two is what's called the first touch rule, meaning when you catch the basketball, almost like in soccer, you got to know what to do with it the moment you catch the basketball. If you touch the ball and let it hold, that's a grenade. And then number three is, always look to +1 the advantage. So if you catch the ball quickly, look to do something immediate with it.
Dustin, curious as to things you've done to really help a team to understand that. So much along the same lines of that, and one of the reasons I think we finish really strong is because we get this concept. One of the reasons I feel like we start a little bit slow every year is we don't necessarily get this concept. And so, and you can fall into that trap. Example in our game last night, there's a team, a good basketball team, and they press a lot, they trap a lot, they run a lot of multiple types of defenses, and you got to protect the ball, and you got to get some rim pressure and get some inside out shots. And if you don't protect the ball and you settle for average shots, you're in trouble. And so that's us last night, down 10 at half. On the road, we, kick ahead occasional time. We shoot probably 90% of our threes in the first half. Have no rim pressure. They're just kind of around the perimeter. Get up some shots. We're not shooting it very well. We turn it over 9 times in the first half. Go through that. And then the second half, completely different. I think we win the second half by like 21 points. We've got a lot of rim pressure, take care of the basketball, all of those types of things. No matter how much you preach that, I think it's a constant battle for them to understand that, because as a young mind, you're like, what's the difference? I'm open. I shot it, and why does that matter? And I've tried to look into this a lot too. Paint touch threes go in at a much higher rate than ones that aren't. I'm curious as to two things. Why is that? Right? Why do they go in at a higher rate? And two, what do you do? What are your teaching points to help them understand why those inside outs are better? Why the opportunity to put pressure on the rim, the multiple things that can happen of getting fouled, getting a finish, getting an easier three. Like, tell me as a coach. Like, I'm trying to figure out. I know that. I think that's great stuff, but how do I get my team to really do that?
Yeah, definitely. A couple of things. One, and great question. It used to be so like I was a head coach at 25, 24. And I used to do what was called, my friends and I would make fun of each other, but we call it the Kobe rule or the MJ rule, which was like, if you wanted a player to buy in, on this concept, somehow tie into a story that MJ used to do it or say that Kobe used to do it, And so what I would say for paint touches, it's Steve Nash's second MVP season. I think it was 92% of his assists came from inside the paint. And it was either inside the paint out or it was inside the paint to a lob, but he got rim pressure at a really small size. And so for the paint touch specifically, a lot of teams we work with have shooting machines, and the shooting machines are designed to shoot from under the basket out to the perimeter. And kinesthetically, it's so much easier to align the body to the rim when the ball's coming inside out. When a pass is thrown laterally, it's just so much harder to square up to the rim and shoot it within rhythm. Now, people can, but just that's why when we do so many of our shooting drills, we work on passing from inside the paint out. Kinesthetically, we're working habitually on shooting towards the front of the rim. The other thing I've noticed is during the FIBA tournament this last year, short misses are normally transition going the other way. And a lot of passes that come from the side of the body are missed short over and over and over again. You want to get the ball to the back, the old adage, Brad shooting, back rim and down shooting. It's so much easier to Brad's your shot when the pass comes from inside out as opposed to the side of the body. And in that FIBA tournament, it was something outlandish, like 88% of misses were missed short in a 5-game span. And a lot of those misses that I'd watch on film were coming from side passes to the rim. And so that's a big reason. The second reason, the way I teach guards, is we do this thing called DOB, D-O-B-B. And I teach this at our PGC sessions as well. This is a Villanova principle, but it's basically when your guards drive to the rim, you ask them, what they're looking at. Because if they're not looking at anything, they're just kind of trying to drive as hard as possible, and then they don't know how to decelerate. So Villanova would use DOB, which is the D stands for dunker. So on the drive, your first check down is that dunker, because that help is coming from that big on the opposite side of the floor. So the opposite dunker is first. The O stands for opposite three. So if the dunker isn't open, that opposite corner probably is, because that's where the help's coming from. The first B stands for behind. So on my drive, if dunker isn't open, opposite three isn't open, then I decelerate. And in my pivot, that behind should be open. And then that final B, and this is where Villanova was so masterful, that final B stands for back to the rim. And so if the dunker isn't open, the opposite isn't open, behind me isn't open, well, then I'm Jalen Brunson and I have a one-on-one in the paint. I need to win that one-on-one. I get back to the rim and get a bucket. And so little things and sticky terminology just reminds them of what to look at when they get in that situation. Because the final thing is, we're all just trying to teach cognition, which is the ability to search, decide, and execute a skill at speed. And as a team, once we get shared cognition, like once we know what everyone's going to do, the offense flows that much better. There's no stagnation anymore.
Yeah, and Dustin, building on this, so, rim pressure kings, corner three queen. Now, getting to the rim, getting paint touches, you got a high school coach listening, like, yes, I love it. I want that in my offense. And you already said it earlier too, though. All players aren't created equal. And so you got 5 players on the court. How many can get to the paint on their own? Maybe one, maybe on a good team 2. So then how those players might just be able to beat a defender one-on-one, whereas other players you got to create an advantage situation through a screen or a long closeout, however you create it. But maybe just unpack, how we get to the paint or how you would articulate that.
Yeah, and great question, because it was funny at the pre-draft. I'd heard a couple of coaches talk about this. The 2 biggest issues with players nowadays, and I think you guys might see this as well. I haven't watched as much high school basketball, but players that are going into the draft to the league and don't make it in the league, the 2 biggest things that they don't understand is 1, spatial awareness. Number 2 is pattern recognition, which is like when to do certain things at certain times. And it's a trickle-down effect, because I'm watching some local college teams here as well. The first thing is a lot of the players don't know how to function in space when the ball isn't in their hands, right? And so I think for coaches, it's really beneficial to give really in-depth role awareness. It's like, I think Don Myers said this really well. He said, as a non-shooter, I really enjoyed this. He said, your non-shooters should have your best shooting percentage, because they should be shooting uncontested layups or throwing really good one more passes. Like those are the only shots they should be shooting or passing. And so I think, to answer your question, the players that attack the basket should know that is their skill set. They should have the ability to catch the basketball and rip and get to the paint in 1 or 2 dribbles. If not, maybe they're a really good one more person. I think the order of operation, the PEMDAs of an offensive player is, level 1 is show that you can hold space in the corner. Show that you can hit over 40% from 3 or 30% from 3. Show you can beat a closeout with 1 dribble. Then you become an offensive player, meaning you can score, but only within the flow of your offense. It come off pin downs, off of flares, off of double staggers, off of a floppy action. That's level 2. Level 3 is then you earn your coach's trust to operate in the pick and roll. And I don't think everyone should operate in the pick and roll. It's the people who know how to get pressure and then also make good passes. And then finally, the 4th layer is you're a shot clock closer, meaning you have the ball in your hands, the shot clock's winding down. Coach trusts you with the keys to go make the right play. So I think first and foremost, players need to understand what their role is. As coaches, clarity creates consistency. And some of these bad shots that are taken by the wrong player on the wrong spot at the wrong time.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about shot selection. I think that's a big frustration for, coaches in general is, one, we know what shots we want them to take, and it doesn't happen at the rate we want it to happen. And I think, we've shared in the course about shot selection, how to teach shot selection. I'm curious as to your thought. Like, you go in, you take a team, where would you start with that? Like, egos are so fragile these days, right? Like, people don't want to hear that I can't do this or I can't do that. They want to know, hey, gosh, they want to coach first tell them they can do everything, which is bad coaching because that would be a lie. but how would you go about that? Like, how would you get players to understand this is why this is a good shot for you, this is why it's a bad shot for you, and how would you go to make them understand that, but not only understand it, but to believe in it?
Yeah, I think you need to gamify everything, right? And I'll tie this all back. Mike McKay used to say, there's nothing more valuable than an evaluated experience. And so what I'd like to do at practices is say we play a 5-on-5 game and we're teaching shot selection. So what we'll do is the gamify is like, all right, everybody, we randomly chose what shots you're allowed to shoot this game. So for example, if I'm a non-shooter, Dustin, you're only allowed to shoot 2-foot finishes and floaters. We randomly chose you, but that's all, that's my skill set. TJ, you lead the country in 3-point percentage. You're only allowed to shoot catch and shoot threes above the above the break. And if you have it in the corner, you're not allowed to shoot. You got to pump fake, get a paint touch, and keep playing. And, if you make these shots, you get bonus points. And so at the end of the 5-minute game, you take a look at what team took the shots they're supposed to take and what team ended up winning. And those usually align with one another. Another way to do it is, TJ, you're really good at shooting from the corner. If you get a corner 3 attempt during this 5-minute game, your team gets a point. Make or miss, you get a point for that shot. If you make the shot, you get the 3 points and that bonus point. There's 4 to teach them, what a good shot is. And at the end of the 5-minute game, this is the fun part, is the evaluation of the experience. It's called ABCD. And ABCD is this: you bring the group in and you talk about what you saw and you allow them to dialogue a little bit. I found that the greatest coaches I've ever been around, they allow their players to talk a lot more and not chat, but talk. And so the A stands for so my coach that I played for, he would say, hey, group 1 just won by 15 points. Here's what I saw. I saw that Scotty was the best player on the floor. Let's ABCD that. And the A stands for agree. So who agrees with that statement? And a couple players would agree, yeah, I agree. I think Scotty did a great job of getting into the paint, and he's really good at kicking to open players. And so he had 8 assists in 5 minutes. The B stands for build. Who wants to build off of that statement? So someone else might build and say, yeah, Scotty played well, but it was the ball screens that were set that gave him the room to operate. The C stands for challenge, which means who wants to disagree with that? Because we want to be confrontational. We just don't want to be disrespectful. So some players will challenge and say, no, I think I was the best player. And you'd be like, no, you were 2 for 15. You actually weren't the best player. And then the D stands for go deeper. Who wants to take anything that was said and take it to a deeper level? And that would be, yeah, so-and-so played well, but on a deeper level, I think offensively our spacing was great. And I found in that dialogue, they start to understand the game a little bit more.
Hey, speak to this, Dustin. This to me is one of the most interesting dilemmas in coaching, right? So we hear coaches talk about games approach and all the things you're talking about, A, B, C, D, this, and okay, this takes time, right? This takes time. And I think one of the biggest crunches coaches face is time. So when you hear people talk in theory and they say, well, I would gamify a lot of this and I would go, do this and I would talk about it at the end. Look, it's a deep situation, a deep dive to really grow a player and a team and their understanding. So in my estimation or my view, when I see that, most people think I don't have the time to invest in that. Let's just take little Johnny or little Sarah and okay, if I had unlimited time to develop them, I might go through all of these different things to get them to that place. But in reality, they've got a shelf on them. They can only be so good. Maybe they can only do this one thing. And do I really want to invest the extra time and energy and effort to go to that place? I think that's a real dilemma coaches have. And so talk to me about that, the rewards of it versus the not reward of it. And I think I experience this. We do a lot of this with our team, and therefore I don't think we always start very good, but I think we finish better because of the process to get us to that place, which can be very frustrating to actually get there. And I think a lot of coaches will bail on that. They'll say, time's up. I only got a week left. I'm just going to put so-and-so in the corner, and I'm going to set a ball screen at the top, and I'm going to get them good at that. And so that whole time crunch, I feel, and I hear it from coaches all the time. How do you do both? How do you really deep develop these players and help your team to understand dominoes and all of that different types of stuff with the time crunch?
Yeah, I mean, I think the time crunch is the biggest enemy. You don't have time to do it all. There's no way they're going to be able to understand it the way that you do. Like you have an idea of it in your head and you try to bring it to life and they just don't understand it the same way. What I found is like where I see trouble is coaches will try to put in this unbelievably innovative offense, but the players don't understand the game well enough to run that offense, or they're not skilled enough to run that offense. So I think if you have any extra time, that should be put in like team version player development. Getting players to learn and read situations really well, read when to kick to somebody else. And on that kick, the person catches, what's the immediate thing I should do with the basketball? And so I think the line is like your offense can't outperform the abilities of your players. And so like if your offense is stagnant at times, you should find ways to teach them how to consistently understand the game a little bit better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and ways to make them less stagnant, right? And so then I think I don't know if you agree with this, but that's where, even at the highest levels of college basketball, right? I'd be curious to hear this, that, we get late in the shot clock or we get late in the game. What's about to happen 95% of the time? A middle ball screen, right? And not that it's the wrong choice, but everybody in the country's doing it, and it's what they're going to default to, and they get to that place. And I get it. It's a simple way to get your best player and an opportunity to play in space. But there's also I also think that's a time crunch decision in some ways. I think that's a default because, that's the easiest thing to be able to do in that. Do we want to involve multiple players? Do we want to hide certain players in here? So curious as to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what is that the best play?
Great. That's a great question. And like to tie in what you asked previously as well, I think as coaches, so say any action we run late game, late possession, our offense is only as good as its ability to create, recognize, and use an advantage. So I think I would ask that team A, hey, you're running a lot of middle ball screens. Why do we set these? What is the reason for the middle ball screen? And normally the NBA team that does these so well, like people don't understand how high level the intellect of these players are. The reason you run a middle ball screen normally is that big is screening the lower half of the defender so that the defender has to go over. That big is rolling hard to the rim to create rim pressure. There are 4 ways to create rim pressure. You can drive it, you can cut it, you can post it, or you can run an action through it. And on that movement to that middle part of the floor, the defense shrinks. And on that re-expansion is where you kill them. The phrase is, it's always the second closeout that beats a defense. But to answer your question about the middle pick and roll, I think if you can complicate the simple, you're really, really good. Meaning everyone runs a pick and roll, but if you can run that pick and roll in 50 different variations, then you're really good. Meaning, like I watched a couple of SEC teams play the other day, and it was so hard to watch because the person setting the screen didn't understand why he's setting the screen is starting the wheel of advantage. His role creates everyone to collapse. Now that guard can kick to the opposite corner like Luka Doncic does so well, and now you really got that team scrambling. But I think the 3 deadliest ball screens that are set normally are drag screens in transition. Teams will set a 7 as a single drag, 77 as a double drag, and they're hard to guard because you can do so many things out of them. You can do 50 different variations. The second one is called a logo ball screen, which is a ball screen set at about 15 feet. And I just posted about Kansas doing this, but it's hard to guard because if your roller can roll well, no one can help. And then the third deadliest ball screen is an empty pick and roll, meaning there's no help on that side of the floor. And so that roller's open.
Dustin, if you took over a program at a college, high school, even middle school level, how much of your practice time would you spend on player development or skill development, within once the season starts? Because we're talking about a lot of these things is dependent on players being good at what they do. So maybe speak to that a minute.
Yeah, I would. I'd give the team to TJ and I'd watch from afar. So basically, I think what I would do is try to get them to understand the game a lot more. And what I mean by that is essentially when doing skill acquisition or some sort of skill development, you're trying to figure out where this piece of the puzzle fits. And so what I would do is I'd have them watch a ton of film on synergy. I'm sure you guys heard Mike McDaniel, the head coach of the Dolphins, who looks like he's 15 years old. But one of the things he did really well is when he got the job, Tua was struggling with his confidence. And we had a bunch of guys when I got to Solano, who struggled with confidence. Then he showed him 700 plays on Synergy of why he's a confident, good quarterback. And so I think the better coaches in skill acquisition that I've seen use film a lot. And they teach through the film the ability to operate in space and the ability to force the defense to tag some sort of way. So that's what I would do. I'd use a lot of film.
Yeah, I like that. And I think coaches, even at younger levels, have access to film. Like Sam, I know you're working with some middle school teams, and you show them film, right? And so I think it's more accessible than it's ever been. And I do think that you want to fast forward the learning process, then they need to see themselves do it or see somebody else do it, not even themselves sometimes. Just an example, we show a lot of NBA clips. And to be honest with you, it resonates with guys, whether I like it or not. Like it's a different game. There's different rules. And that's tough to explain sometimes to players because the defensive rules are going to give you better spacing by nature, just the way they have to play defense. And in college, they might load to the ball with 5 guys and your best player is not going to get the same look you would get at a pro level. I tell one of my guys who's going to be a pro, look, I think your reads are going to get easier when you get to become a pro than they are in college because of the number of bodies that go to certain places. But we have to learn how to make them at the level we're at right now, and it becomes a process. But I think one of the things we make a mistake with on film is too much. I mean, what we're doing right now, which I'm finding to be effective, is we have our coaches and they're assigned a player, and the goal is like 2 clips. Like just 2 clips a day, like maybe one of something you're not doing and then somebody in the pro level that did it well. Or maybe it's just 2 things that you need to work on. And you'd be surprised at how far some of that can go. I think our tendency is to go in there and check off a 30-minute film session. We did a 30-minute film session. And so question for you, Dustin, what do you think are some of the most effective ways to use film?
Yeah, exactly. So I think a couple of thoughts with that. So I remember one of the schools where I was coaching, we'd watch film every day, and it almost felt like a box to check. Like, did we watch film? Yes, good. 7 to 7:45 in the morning, we watched film. But it's the retention is everything. So I remember coming out of film, I'd ask 8 or 9 guys, and I'd write down, hey, summarize film in 2 words. What'd you get? And everything was different. Oh, we don't rebound well, or like they would watch just themselves. Oh, my shoes don't look good. Just things that, so it isn't serving a purpose. So I think, being a quote unquote younger coach, I would do a couple of things. I'd find players that aren't playing up to their standards in my eyes, and I'd compare them to a player. So I'd say, hey, so-and-so, you can be Dylan Brooks. You can play a lot like that. Maybe that's not a good example, but you can play like that person. He's really good at doing these 2 things. And then I'd go on Synergy and I'd go on YouTube and I'd show him 2 or 3 clips of Dylan Brooks. And now this person has that vision of who I want them to be. Now they might watch that person and understand the game a little bit more. Because I started to realize, like, one, the human spirit is indomitable. Meaning if I just say, oh, that player's never going to learn, man, I'm not very good at what I do. And I get kind of angry with my college coaching friends when I'll show a clip and they'll say like, oh, we could never do that. I disagree. I think if you teach them the game of basketball, but then also teach them the vocabulary of the game, that gives them so much more room to learn and understand what's going on. And the final part is players right now, and I know this through PGC, they watch reels, which are 8-second bits. And, as coaches, that which gets praised gets repeated. What gets praised right now on reels and on Instagram and on TikTok is not good basketball at all. And so I want to show them what cool to me is. And even if I have to call it like Coach Aubert's cool folder, maybe it's throwing 1 more passes, maybe it's taking charges, but they can see these things and see where I'm coming from. But like you're saying, TJ, I think it's really cool when it comes in like a one-on-one situation or just really quickly, here's 2 or 3 clips I found, as opposed to everyone, watch how so-and-so doesn't box out,
Yeah, I think this is worth telling because I think this is a really good learning for coaches. And when we're talking about not just film, but scouting reports, but, just teaching, like you want to become, and we talked about this at PGC Coaching, you want to become a master teacher. And so I'm going to give you an example of what Dustin is talking about here. We had we have several coaches, and we have a younger coach, and I asked him to put together, a scouting report on some team that we're going to play. And he comes back and, it's 47 clips and we cover everything that they could possibly do. And so when he got done, I asked him this, I said, so you're telling me if we guard all 42 of those things, we're going to win, right? And he's like, yeah, I think we got it. And I was just playing with them. I was messing around because, look, we got 1 day of preparation before we turn around and play a game. And there's 42 things we got to guard, and we got to go through. And what is the goal? What am I trying to do for my players? I'm trying to teach them. I'm trying to make them better. And there's a lot of things that go into that. Hear it, see it, do it. There's a lot of you have to discern what information is most important versus least important. But one of the mistakes I think coaches make, whether it's in player development, film work, scouting reports, is we like to cover our own butt. Like, we want to make sure that everything's on there. We want to make sure on the scouting report, I hear this all the time. Hey, tell me about this player we got to guard. Hey, well, if we can take away the shot in transition and the kick out, and we can take away the dribble and the mid-range and take charges when he drives, if we can do all that, we're good. And I'm thinking, all right, what's the reality of that possibly happening? And so what can we do to actually make that better, make that film better? So Graham did a really good one the other day. I said to my coaches, if you're going to go for 3 or 4 minutes on film, I want you to be able to tell me a story. And so Graham put together this film. It's like, Graham, I asked him, what's the story you want to tell? The story I want to tell is we need to choose the big piece of the pie more often, which is really just what you were talking about earlier, just recognizing how to pick the right lane to make an easier decision and how to process that information because you have more time. So he goes through it. So he shows the first 2 clips, and there are a previous game of 2 easy layups we got. And he asked him, what do you see in these 2 layups? And they're like, well, Coach drew those up. And, okay, so why did Coach draw these up? And they went through all the things, kind of like ABCD in a little bit. He wanted us to play in space. He wanted us to cut harder. He wanted us to, he went through all these things. Okay. He said, now let's watch us do that without Coach telling us what to do on a set play. And he showed some good examples of where we did that and some bad examples of where he did that. And he said, listen, we would love not to have to draw up so many plays, put all the trust because we believe you can do this as players. Here's some examples of you doing it at a high level, and here's some examples of you doing it at a really low level. And he told a story, and I think all the players understand I can do that without Coach, And so using film as a teacher, I think, is a really, really important thing, whether it's individual or team. I think it goes to what you're speaking about, why it's so important to be able to do that. And I think coaches miss that because we want to cover our own tail and say, well, we told you so.
Right. And I think, you hit this perfectly. I just heard this on a podcast, and I love it. So one, Lynn Roberts, the coach at Utah, used to say this, is they care, but they care differently than we do. So when we're out here talking about the 9th different out of balance play they ran last December, they're just not retaining that info, but we want to check it. We want to say, okay, we taught them that. And when they don't guard it correctly, we yell to ourselves, I told you, right? And I remember my players would miss a layup in transition, and I'd always yell at them. And then my mentor would say, hey, I know you're mad because you want everyone to know you taught him better. But that does not do anything for his long-term development for you yelling at him, right? And it's true. I yell because I want to show everyone in these stands I taught him better, because I look inward. But the second part of that, I love the storytelling. There's this thing called the Krav Maga theory, and it doesn't have to do with the fighting Krav Maga, but it's basically this famous coach in the UK. He's a soccer coach, but he says when we tell stories, even if they're quick anecdotes, our minds open up a little bit more and we retain information better. Because millions of years ago, or hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we were tribal by nature, we had to tell stories to remember things. Hey, where did you find that dead, animal? Oh, go to the blue tree, and the blue tree, turn left. On left, you'll see a log, and it's right over there. And so his thing was even if you're only telling a 30-second anecdote, players love that. And so the one he would always give was, and I'm trying to intertwine this to PGC. So if you come to PGC and hear this, I apologize. But he said, he grew up in Ireland, and he'd walk with his grandfather every day past this church. And one day there's these 3 men who were building and excavating the beginning of this church. It hasn't been built yet. And they talked to each one of these guys. And so they talk to the first guy and they say, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm digging a hole, because he's starting to lay the foundation. He goes to the second guy, what are you doing? He's doing the same thing. He goes, me, I'm just earning $15 an hour. Then he goes to the third guy and he goes, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm laying the foundation for the greatest church that's ever going to be built in this country. And one day I'm going to bring my grandkids to see the thing that I built from scratch. And so it's this idea of why are we doing this thing? We're trying to leave the jersey in a better place. And so I told that story to my players, and one of them raised his hand. He said, Coach, we don't get paid anything to be here. And I'm like, that's not the point of the story. It's just kind of why are we doing this thing,
Dustin, you mentioned something earlier I want to go back to again, which is, you talked about you go around and talk to college coaching friends, and they're like, well, my guy can't do this, or my kid can't do this. And
Mhm.
I want to highlight it because I think this is something that happens a lot where coaches have a huge platform to impact. And there's so many good coaches out there. And even the good coaches, sometimes we fall into this line of thinking. It's a fixed mindset, essentially. Like, nah, this is what it is. This is the way it is. This is the way this player is always going to be. And I think what you were alluding to is no, like, growth mindset says if I teach, if I communicate, if I coach, I can bring out these qualities in a player. And I think along with that, there's always a tension between what that player can do in the coming weeks or months of a season versus their long-term possibilities or opportunities. So I just wanted you to unpack a little bit more of that, kind of what I'm sharing there, along with. Well, I'll stop there. What else do you have to say on that piece?
Yeah, I think there's 4 questions I like to ask, like myself and my staff, anyone in the room, and I give this to our staff at PGC as well. I call it the Fab Four. It's just questions to like grow yourself as a leader, but also like think about it. If I'm your college coach, and I'm a 4-year coach, you're spending more time with me than most other people in your walk of life. I better be impacting you in some way or another. If I'm not teaching you how to treat someone on a date really well, I'm not teaching you, how to carry yourself as a member of society, I have failed you in those impactful years of 18 to 22. Now, everything's different now because of the portal, so maybe you get them for a year. But if you can impact them in the year, I'm sure they stay a little bit longer. And so here are the 4 questions. Number 1 is, how have I recognized someone else's leadership today? And that's just called impact. What have I done to make it more likely someone in my space will lead some type of way? And leadership isn't, I'm the sage on the stage, listen to me. It's, I'm the guide on the side. I might say something that might help you. So our phrase was LA equals LC, leadership acknowledged equals leadership created. So if anyone in my gym like acknowledged somebody else, I want to let them know they just created a leadership moment. So good for you, especially with young men who don't know how to get empathetic and don't know how to be vulnerable. Number 2 is, what have I done to make it more likely I will learn something today? And that's just continual improvement. We're all on this journey of mastery. So what have I done to, maybe it's read an article, maybe it's share with the team a video I saw. Number 3 is, what have I done to make it more likely someone else has learned something today? It's just mentorship. And then the final one is, what great thing have I said about someone who isn't in the room? And this is a huge one that I got from a mentor. This is called third-party praise. And it just shows the young men in my space that even if you're not around me, I hold you in high regard. I'm not going to talk badly about you when you're not near me. You'll hear me say it all the time. Oh, I got this from so-and-so. I got this from Sefu Bernard. Because I want to honor that person and show them, I got this from somebody. This isn't mine. But the final rule with that is anytime we steal something from somebody else, this is a coaching rule, you thank them 3 times and the 4th time is yours. So I got this from so-and-so. I got this from so-and-so. I got this from so-and-so. The 4th time, oh no, that's mine. I made that up. Yeah. So those are the big 4.
Yeah, I love this. Hey, Dustin, we usually hold episodes to about 30 minutes. We're about 50 minutes in. I barely feel like we're scratching the surface here. So we definitely got to do a second part to this because I want to dive into the product you created too. I mean, we haven't even had the chance to talk about just offensive actions you think are really working and how to become a creative offensive mind. And we've barely even scratched the surface on the leadership skills and qualities that you're so good at teaching. But before we go, because we're definitely going to do a second one, but before we go, I want to know where can people follow you so they can get these tidbits? I know come to your PGC session. It's a work of art, right? So like when you look up on the schedule, see if you can't get there to Dustin, check that out at PGC Basketball. As our PGC coaching member, you're in our Facebook club and leading coaches there and sharing. But where else can they find you, the general public find you to get to know more?
Yeah, my MySpace. I'm just kidding. Yeah, basically, I'm Twitter mostly is where I am, but my Twitter is just my name at Dustin Aubert, and I like to watch the game a lot, so I'll just put on actions that I see. And then on Instagram, I'm at Dustin_AUB. But if anyone ever wants to chat or talk, my email is just Dustin@PGCBasketball.com. Just a hoops junkie like you guys who just always love talking the game. So.
Yeah, I love it. And Dustin, like you said, we definitely got to get you on more because it feels like there's just so many more things we can talk about. And we get the pleasure of doing that at all of our PGC retreats or just on phone calls or whatever it might be. We get to do that a lot with you. But general public doesn't get to do that as much. And I know they're going to be hungry. Our Hardwood Hustle loves this kind of information of growing as a coach and how they can be better, how they can be more transformational, how they can impact players. And you do such a phenomenal job. So thanks for joining us today, Dustin.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me, man.
Yeah, hey, he is Sam, I am TJ, and we are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_Hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.